On Sunday evenings, this place that you're sitting in, it transforms into like a student center, middle school, high school, starting around 5 o'clock, or not around 5 o'clock, just a little before 5 o'clock. Middle school students start piling in here, and they do whatever they want to in here. And honestly, I don't care what they do as long as like Jesus is the center of what they're doing. I mean, they just do all kind of craziness. I mean, they put stains all over the place, so you can probably look down and see middle school, high school pizza marks. I don't know. There's been inflatables here that go all the way to the ceiling. There's been trampoline. There's been all kind of stuff that happens in here on Sunday. You just have no idea, and probably our insurance doesn't know either. But it's fine. It's a lot of fun, though. It's a lot of fun happening here on Sunday nights, and Jesus is at the heart of what's happening. So I was dropping my son, which y'all got to meet just a few minutes ago. Emerson is in 6th grade, and so I was dropping him off to be a part of students from middle school. So middle school starts 5 to 6:30, and then high school comes in after, and so they're separated. And so I was in one of those things where it's like, okay, I'm going to drop him off, but honestly, I probably got some things to do to get ahead. And so I was like, I'm just going to go work upstairs in my office, and I'll stay until he's done, and then I'll just take him home. And so that's what I did. I went to go get, after that was done, we're in the between part where we're flipping high school to middle school. And so I came downstairs to get him, and this whole section of chairs was gone, and there was a huge gaga ball pit there, and there was lights, and there was music, and it's just all kind of stuff. And there were some high school girls sitting on the back row there. Hey, Brad, you're sitting right where they were. Hey, Ellie. Hey, Heather, Tim. Right, that little thing right there, right? So they were sitting right there, and so I was doing an Instagram post, kind of just talking about students. I just walked down, and there was just such a really great environment. The kids would call it a vibe. Like there was just such a good vibe happening. And I was like, I'm going to document this. And so I turned around. So I got to the girls that were sitting on that row, and I was like, ain't that right, girls? And so they just looked at me like I lost my mind. So they were all on their phones, and they just all at the same time just kind of look up, and they're like, okay. And so I finished my little Instagram story, and so I go back to him, and I was like, hey, God, do y'all not know how social media works? I'm supposed to be excited. And one of them looks at me and says, you have social media? And I was like, yeah. Freaking invented social media. You know what I'm saying? No, I didn't say that. But I was looking at it, I was like, what kind of question is that? What do you mean? I was like, what do you mean? They're like, well, we just, usually people your age don't have social media. And I was like, my age? What do you mean my age? What is this my age of which you speak? How old do you think I am? Right? So for sure, that's a dumb question. You don't ask that question. You know what I'm saying? I should have just imagined what they thought and moved on in my life. Right? So before I tell you what they said, just to be clear here, I'm 39 years old. Okay? Did you just laugh? Come on. Now I'm hurt. So I'm 39 years old. My birthday's December 29th. I was born in 1983. And so if you want to make sure, you can go put your phone, put my birthday in your calendar. You want to keep the Christmas and the birthday gifts separate. Okay? So don't give me no combo gift, okay? You know what I'm saying? Just keep them separate. So anyway, I'm 39 years old. So anyway, I look at this girl, and I was like, well, how old do you think I am? And she was like, I'm guessing probably like 53. So I was like, my feelings aren't hurt. I'm not crying, you're crying. I was like, 53? And she was like, yeah, look how much gray hair you have. I had a hat on. And so I was like, there's a lot that's not gray in there. And she was like, no, there's not. Like, okay, well, this conversation is over. This is done. I wonder if sometimes people look at our church and think we're older than we are. The truth is, no matter what it looks like from the outside, my hope is that we always act like we're young. Because there are some things that we've learned in our first 5 years of life as a church. Some behaviors that we continue to display that I think we should never grow out of. And so even if the aesthetics start to look like it's aging, my hope is that the principles that drive it remain the same. When we take a look at what our church has been able to accomplish over the last 5 years, there's a few things that I'll highlight. We don't talk about this a lot publicly. Once a year, we'll put out a graphic at the end of the year. It's like, hey, just here's a summary, just so that people are aware that are connected. Like, hey, here it is. But we put one together for the last 5 years just to kind of give some talking points of, hey, these are the things that we've invested in. When you take a look at it, there's a total of 30,159 volunteer hours, which is a consecutive 3.4 years of nonstop serving, if you were to add it up that way. We've had 63 community partnerships. So organizations or nonprofits in the community that were doing incredible things that we said, hey, we want to get behind you. We want to support you. We don't want to take over your thing. We just want to give you a shot in the arm, whether it's energy or finances or whatever it is that we're showing up to support what you're doing. There's been 63 of them. 144 baptisms. Over 2,000 next steps, spiritual next steps. We've invested in 33 different church plants all over the country. We've had 608 ice cream truck events. Let me tell you this. When we got the ice cream truck, let me just pause here for a second. The ice cream truck was the first thing that we did. Before we had an office, we had an ice cream truck. Before we had a bank account, we had an ice cream truck. Me and some guys went up, and we got this. It was this ragamuffin truck. We had to trailer it back here from Atlanta. It was. If you had asked me then, hey, how many events is this little truck going to get you? I would have been like, if we can make it to 100 over the next 18 to 24 months, that'll be a win, right? That'll be a win. And it just did a 608th event. In total, 105,448 pieces of ice cream have gone out of the truck. Now, ice cream is what we started with, and it's still a big part of who we are. When we first started the ice cream truck, there were some people that they just weren't fans of it, which is fine, to each their own. And my favorite comment was, this church would rather give people ice cream than give them Jesus. And which I was like, hey, it is what it is. It is what it is. The truth is, our church is different. And our church, it takes all kinds of churches to reach all kinds of people. And our church pursues people that have already made up their mind that Jesus isn't worth it. And they've already made up their mind that Jesus' followers are the worst. And that have already made up their mind that if God really loved me, things would have worked out differently in my life. And so I've shut him out of my life. And those are the people that we attempt to chase down week in and week out. There were 110 churches in Coweta County before we planted a foundation. And we asked the question over and over again, why don't people go to church? And everybody knows the answer to that. If I asked each one of you, why don't people go to church? And we listed 10 answers. If we were to survey everyone, the list would be the same. Every single person knows why people don't go to church. So, the problem isn't we don't know why. The problem is no one has created a solution for the why. And so we decided we will plant a church that's a solution to the why. And so when we think through everything, we think through those specific reasons people say no. And then we do something to help them overcome that no. So for sure, if you're a follower of Jesus and you're sitting here and I'm like, I don't like the way they do that, it's probably because you said yes, right? And you said yes. And so we don't think about your yes anymore. We're thinking about people who have already said no. That's how we prioritize decisions. And that's how we want you to prioritize decisions. Jump on board with that. Or there's 110 churches in Coweta County that you'll probably fit right in at. That's fine. There's plenty of seats. When you take a look at it and you look at these statistics, it looks like, man, that's a lot. That's great, right? This is good. Things have just kind of fell into place. It's been 5 years. That's a lot to accomplish in 5 years, right? It seems like or feels like it's just been easy. But the truth is, it's been far from it. It's been the most difficult 5 years of my life. The most challenging 5 years, heartbreaking 5 years, emotionally draining 5 years. 40% of all church plants die before their 5th birthday. In fact, today, about right now, maybe 10 more minutes, there's a church that we helped in Nashville that's having their very last Sunday. They didn't survive. COVID happened and they just never recovered. And so they're gathering today for the very last time to kind of have a little funeral type thing for it. And they're going to wrap up here in just a few moments. So 4 out of 10 don't make it to their 5th birthday. That's not even including the COVID numbers that are going to start coming out in the next 24 months. Or having a tornado take away your primary gathering place. I don't know how we made it this far. Honestly, we've been between a rock and a hard place since we launched. But the truth is, that's honestly right where we want to be. The psalmist says this, "Truly he is my rock and my salvation. He's my fortress. I will never be shaken." And so when we find ourselves between a rock and a hard place, we realize that the rock isn't just any old rock. That the rock has some significance, and that rock is Jesus. This morning, I want to share with you 5 catalytic moments that created this Jesus-led movement that you experience week in and week out. The first one is launch. The first of those moments, those movements, is launch. Launch should have never happened. We partnered with an organization called Stadia. Stadia is a church planting organization that plants churches all over the country. And as we thought through, it's the organization that I applied to be a lead planter with, and they do evaluations of planters, and they kind of give you a grade. A red light means no chance, and a yellow light means you need some more time, and a green light means go, you're ready to go. And then they do that for networks and organizations that are trying to plant churches. And so they did that for me and for my wife as we walked through that process of assessment, and they gave us a green light, and we ended up planting here. So when we decided to plant with Stadia and decided to jump in with that, one of their metrics and marks is in the first year of pre-launch, you need to do an event where you can gather at least 100 people. If you're doing enough in your community to make people aware of what you are, then 100 people is kind of like the thing. If you can't gather 100 people, you need to delay launching, right? You need to or take a different look at your strategy. And so we started to get into it. We started this project in February of 2017. We started working on it, and then we get to about the end of summer, August, and we're like, okay, we got to do this first event to see if anyone actually pays attention to anything we do in the community. And so we did this thing where we just decided, hey, we're going to do this thing called Pumpkins in the Park, and that's going to be our very first event. And so we're going to get a bunch of pumpkins, and we're going to give them away for free, and we're going to have a time for families to come out because we kind of assessed what was happening in downtown, and there just wasn't anything during that particular time of year in the downtown district, and so we think it serves a need. We think families will be interested in it. So we did Pumpkins in the Park right here at Greenville Street Park, just like almost right across the street, right? We did Greenville Street Park, and we were just like crossing our fingers, like, please, hopefully we've done something right over the last 6 months, and maybe at least 100 people will show up. And I remember sitting there on the day of, we're setting up, and we got flags, and we got our tent, and we're like, this is going to happen, and I'm just thinking, like, ain't nobody coming to Pumpkins in the freaking park today. And then they started coming. So 179 people came to Pumpkins in the Park the first time. Just blew my, if you had told me that over 1,200 people would come to Pumpkins in the Park 5 years from then, I would like, you've lost your mind. But that's what we just had. We did our latest Pumpkins in the Park, over 1,200 folks. We had to stop counting. Well, that's just how we could count. You know what I'm saying? Our little clicker just stopped, I guess. I don't know. Unreal. And so we were cloud 9. Like, okay, maybe this is supposed to happen. Let's go. This was supposed to happen. At the same time period, we lost $90,000 from supporting churches because they didn't like some of the things we were doing. If you want to know the real story behind it, you got to come to Vision Sunday. I tell the story the first week of October, so wait 6 months and we'll get into it. But that's it. We lost $90,000. That started this like, okay, so Pumpkins in the Park was good, but we didn't have no money. You know what I'm saying? It takes a lot of money to start a church, and so we had lost it. They pulled support. $90,000 total from 2 different places. And so we were back to, this isn't good. And we said, okay, well, let's do what worked. Let's do another Pumpkins in the Park, except for in November. But nobody needs pumpkins in November, so let's just call it like Fam Fest. Let's do the same type thing we did, and let's call it Fam Fest, and let's do it in Greenville Street Park. And so we did it, and nobody showed up. It was awful. And I was like, what have we done? It's only been 30 days. Where did everybody go? Like, we've lost it. It was an absolute, complete flop and failure. It was miserable. And I was like, what do we do? I was meeting with Noonan High School trying to get them to let us meet in their space, and they wouldn't let us do it. Two failed attempts, 2 meetings, 2 just no. We don't do recurring we don't do any of that. So we don't do recurring rentals. So there's no chance. Not going to happen. We hired Jason Walton, our community outreach pastor. He was a campus pastor out at the University of West Georgia at their main campus out in Carrollton for about 12, 13 years. And so when he came on staff, he started working into the community. His wife, Erin, who was doing keys this morning, Erin has been a long-time member of the Coweta County school system, and so she arranged a meeting that evidently was a little different than the meetings I had arranged previously. And third time is the charm, or maybe Aaron Walton is the charm. I don't know. Hey, yeah, you can give her a whoop whoop. And then all of a sudden, it went from no to, oh, we would love to have y'all here. And I was like, what in the world? You know what I'm saying? Honestly, on that launch Sunday, it was 14 degrees outside. If you remember Noonan High School, there was 90 parking spots at the front of it, and it was a long walk. From the edge of from the very furthest parking spot, it was 2 minutes, 17 seconds to walk from that car all the way up, which you had to walk in the cold, 14 degrees. And I was thinking to myself as we were prepping for launch Sunday, I was like, ain't nobody showing up today. Nobody's going to come try a church that's never been to church before, never done anything before in 14-degree weather. They're going to say, I'll catch you next week, right? If you're any good, I'll catch you next week. I'll never forget that day. Launch season, a series of catalytic moments that created a Jesus-led movement. Turns out we've got a video to show you that has a much less gray-haired man in it that I no longer recognize. Take a look.
Today is Launch Sunday, January 14th, 2018, out of Noonan High School. We're in the auditorium. We have tons of volunteers. Today is a good day. So I walked outside this morning and it was 14 degrees. And so I was like, man, we picked a great day to launch a church. As I drove down to Noonan High School, I started thinking, each of these homes on either side, like maybe they're coming to church this morning. I drove past the 90 parking spots in the front, hopped out of the truck, and I walked inside of the auditorium from the back door, and everything was set. The band was about to start rehearsing, and I got to just sit in the middle and listen to them rehearse as I went over my message. And got to spend some time with our entire team. And then here came the people, lots and lots of people. I saw a lot of new faces. I tell you, it was great that I saw different age groups. I mean, it was multi-generational, which I thought was incredible. I saw very generous people. I saw the culmination of a faithful team, and God decided that we could be trusted with his people. I think the thing that I'm most proud of is to know that I feel confident in what we do on Sunday mornings, and I feel confident about our outreach in our community. We want to help husband and wife have a healthy marriage. We want healthy parents. We want to prioritize children. We want to make sure that they're given the very best opportunity to come into a relationship with Jesus. I hope that people of Noonan come to know our church as a place where, regardless of what they've been through, or what they're going through, or what they think about who they are or what they ought to be, that they find a place where they can belong. I really do want to bring life to that phrase, you belong here. I think Noonan will be better for it, and I think God will be proud of it.
What a goofy looking dude. What's going on with that beard? That's so weird. It wasn't gray. That's right. ice cream has been a big deal and a big part of who we are. And so keeping with that theme and keeping with our theme of shopping and eating local and supporting the local businesses, we reached out to Rock Salt Milk Bar and said, hey, will you help us with 5 custom flavors for our 5th birthday? And so it was a surprise for the 9. Obviously for the 11, you walked past them already. And so we have 5 flavors for our 5 moments that we're going to cover this morning. The first of which, and it's all available to everyone. And by the way, I don't care how cold it is. We don't own freezers here. And so we don't have any place to put this ice cream when it's done. So you've got to eat it all. I don't care. You've got to go eat it. So it's got to be gone when we're done. The first one is Launch Sunday. Our second moment, it came in 2019. We were already serving the school system. Low-end public schools or low-income public schools was a big piece of who our heartbeat was for. And we knew that if we could help change schools, we could change communities, because that's where the communities revolved around. And so we said, hey, we want to dive in there. And we'd already started partnering with Ruth Hill in a number of different ways, but we wanted that partnership to go deeper. And we wanted a little bit more meat on the bones with it. And so Jason, our community outreach pastor, was searching for that way to have a little bit more impact. And he ran into the director of a local nonprofit, called Communities in Schools, that at the time had a really good in with the public school system. They were having a conversation back and forth, just like, hey, what are you doing? What are you doing? And Jason was just sharing. And so Jason had talked about what he was doing specifically in his role here in our heart for the school system. And they said, hey, you should check out this mentoring program that we have. We mentor kids that are at risk in the public school system. And so Jason was intrigued by it. He brought it back and said, hey, this could be what we're looking for. And I was like, well, I don't know. I've never heard of this mentoring program. And Jason honestly had been in Newnan forever, and he had never heard of the mentoring program. And so he was like, I don't know. They said it's not new, but they said it's been struggling. They're kind of taking it over from the school system. And so there's this thing. What do you think? And I was like, I think before we jump into it, we need to send you through it and see if it's something we can actually do. And if it's functioning, there's too many questions. So in fall of 2018, Jason went through the training and started mentoring a student at Ruth Hill Elementary School. And he did that through the rest of that school year, all the way through spring and that semester of 2019. And at the conclusion, we evaluated it and said, hey, we think this is it. We think this provides an incredible opportunity for people who are connected to Jesus to go into the school system and be a light and be a positive role model for kids that are for sure at risk. And so you become at risk as a kid, and if you kind of fall below a benchmark in one of 3 areas, there's attendance, behavior, or academic issues. And when you fall below that kind of line, the chances of you graduating plummets. And so for those children that are at risk, they provide services. One of those services are in-person mentoring that are positive role models for them to kind of take a step and rethink some things and just have some consistency that may or may not be there in their life. And so that organization was called Communities in Schools. It's now changed its name to Elevate Coweta Students, and we continue to partner with them today. We send people into the school system. In fact, we have a volunteer from Foundation inside the Coweta County Public School System every single day of the school year. There's no exceptions to it. As long as the school is open, right? Then we send people in, and we're allowed to be a part of it. COVID made that really difficult. There was a long, extended period of time where we couldn't do mentoring. Yet it was something that we waited and waited and waited for, and have since launched back into it. Mentoring was an enormous decision. It only took us about 6 weeks for us to become the single largest provider of mentors in Coweta County. And we continue to be the single largest provider of mentors in Coweta County. In fact, there is no shortage of children who need a positive role model in their life. It's lunch once a week. It's 27 minutes and 30 seconds. It's the shortest lunch in the history of the world, right? And they come in, they sit down, and you just sit and chill and talk and ask them questions, or maybe they ask you questions, or maybe you're just quiet with them. It's just presence is really, at the end of the day, the thing that makes it go and makes it happen. A lot of times we have people that would complain, like, you know what, the school system is on a downward turn. They took the 10 Commandments off the wall, or they don't allow prayer in schools, and so we're fed up and we're tired and we're frustrated. And like, man, they just let people pray in schools. And I can't tell you how many people I saw from the Hamlin situation talking about, hey, well, they don't let people pray on schools and football, but they were okay with praying for Damar Hamlin. Like, come on, Christians, is that really who we are? So we have a good thing happen, and then we talk about the bad things that they didn't want to happen. That logic doesn't make sense in terms of us making progress, right? It makes no sense. If that was you should take it down, right? It makes absolutely no sense, right? But what we do want to do is, for all of you who have issues with it, there is an opportunity for you to go and meet with a kid who's at risk. every single week. A least of these kids. What does Jesus say? As you do unto the least of these, you've also done unto me. That's what we need to be doing. And so if we're going to get upset about 10 commandments and not praying, the school system allows Holy Spirit-filled praying believers inside the schools of the least of these elementary schools, and we have an opportunity to do that. So put our money where our mouth is. Let's do something about it. That's why we're the single largest provider of mentors in Coweta County, because we understand that we have an opportunity to serve kids. We don't go and preach Jesus to them. We just show up, and they see Jesus in us. And the consistency that comes with it, being available, it begins slowly but surely creating change. That was a really difficult decision. People ask all the time, how many of those people come to your church? Hardly none. Hardly none. But if that's what we're doing outreach for, so people will come to church, then we have missed the point. The reason we do outreach is so that people see Jesus in us, not to create a destination for them to come to, but that maybe their heart and their life might be the destination that Jesus gets in. Mentoring is a catalytic moment that created a Jesus-led movement. And today we also have an ice cream flavor to savor those moments. It's called Mentor Chocolate Chip. It was March 12th, 2020, and I was getting some text messages from the school system that said, hey, things are about to close up. And I was like, all right, that's cool. Yeah, it's Thursday. Y'all just going to miss school tomorrow? And they're like, no. We're going to close the school. And I was like, oh, okay. Like, yeah, have you seen the news, like this virus thing? And I was like, this is getting heavy. So when you say close the school, can you define that? And like, yeah, it means actually what it says, close the school. We're going to close the school. And so I was like, oh my gosh, this is not good. And so I sent a text message to our staff and our leadership team. And we took a screenshot of it. I'm going to read it to you, but I wanted you to see the mess that it's just stupidity. Honestly, what you're about to see in this, we had no idea. We had no clue. But this is saved in foundation history. This is what the text message said. And given that the school system and the government are deciding on what we can do as a church, we need to have a staff meeting in the morning at 8:30. Please make arrangements for that to be possible. It was their off day. So this was the night before. Here it is. Please make arrangements for that to be possible. I will give a list of questions for us to have answers to. The goal of the meeting is to have a completed plan. What an idiot. Yeah. The goal of the meeting is to have a completed plan for what if there are no gatherings and schools are closed. Here's the list of the questions I wanted them to have answers to. How is church a resource? For kids at home strategy. What do our people need to hear for spiritual guidance? Do we need more small groups? Do we need specific studies? Social media ministry? Students at home strategy? Sunday alternatives? Streaming possibilities? Please respond to this and let me know you got it. I got 2 responses. They were all there for the meeting, but I only got 2 thumbs up. You know what I'm saying? And I think it's because they started reading the questions. They're like, shoot, that's probably mine. And they just got to work. And so the next morning, we gathered together in our staff, or in our little office. It was just 2 blocks from here. And I was like, hey, here's the deal. School's closed. So that's not even a question anymore. They're not letting us in there on Sunday. Most every other church in the county met that next Sunday except for us, because we had no place. And so every other church met one more Sunday. We were the only ones that I'm aware of that very first deal, we were like, hey, we don't have no place to meet. And so we were like, hey, how do we do church in 48 hours from now? And at the time, we didn't live stream. We had a dad cam, like, you know what I'm talking about, those little camcorders that fit in your hand. It's got a little pad thing that you hold like this, and it's got a little flip-out screen, and you can, like, hit the buttons from, you know what I'm talking about? That's what we had, and we set it on a tripod at the back of the Noonan High School auditorium, and we just filmed a big wide shot that was from, like, 75 feet away, and then we just recorded the whole thing and then just put it on YouTube later, and that was the extent of it. So there was no internet to live stream. There was none of those kind of things for us to work with. It was just dad cam and just hold it steady and then just put it online. That was it. And so it was like, okay, well, look, you know what? Our iPhones are actually better than that, so I ain't worried about Sunday. We'll have an iPhone type thing. We actually have all invested in pretty decent iPhones, and so we'll just Facebook Live, and then that's how we'll do church. I mean, that's in my mind, that's worst case, right? That's how we can do it. Maybe we can get the dad cam hooked up to the internet to kind of make it a little, but worst case, we got it covered. I remember I walked in Sunday morning. It looked like Warner Brothers had moved into our office. There was cameras everywhere, and there were TVs, and there were wires all over the floor. And I was like, what in the world happened? It turns out Christian, who's walking across hey, Christian. Oh, he doesn't like when I do this. Christian Christian had this brilliant idea, because again, we were early on this. He said, you know what, I'm going to call rental companies. And so he called rental companies before rental companies knew that supply and demand was about to be out of control. So he called rental companies, and he rented gear for hardly nothing. Like, it was stupid cheap for us to rent them for 2 weeks, because we didn't know. It was like 2 weeks would be fine. Yeah, 2 weeks would be fine. And so he rented them for 2 weeks. And so we had we could do a live stream. Like, okay, this is unreal. This is unreal. And at the end of the 2 weeks, we had a decision to make. Like, all right, what are we going to do? Are we going to obviously it's going to take a little longer, because at the time, then government came out and said, hey, 8 weeks. 8 weeks and we'll be there, right? 8 weeks and we'll be good to go. And I was like, all right, 8 weeks. That's a long time. 8 weeks is a long time, because we already had 2 weeks. That's 10 weeks total. And then there was a flatten the curve moment, and then there was a flatten the curve B, and then a flatten the curve C. There's lots of curves. This thing was curvy, and it was lots, and there was no flattening. It was just curvy. It was. And so we had to decide, all right, what do? Do we invest in live streaming gear, or do we continue? When we went back after our 2-week rental was up, they realized supply and demand was a thing, and everyone else needed the gear that we had, every church in the country. And so prices were through the roof, and they weren't going to give us the rental on the same prices we had rented it 2 weeks ago. And so we had to decide, do we need to invest in gear, or do we just roll the dice in 8 weeks and rent? So we kind of created our break-even number, and our break-even number was 11 weeks. We needed this to go at least 11 weeks to break even on what it would cost us to rent, what it would cost to live stream. Anything past that, and we were like making money if we had purchased ourselves. And so we were like, we were planning on live streaming at some point in the future. We'll just pull some money out of savings, and we'll just roll the dice and do it. It was a really great decision, because 11 weeks turned into I don't know how many, lots of weeks. Lots of weeks. In fact, we were one of the last churches to go back to in-person gatherings in the county, because we had no place to meet. Schools wouldn't let us to come in, because there was an additional people inside the schools that they didn't want to have a cleaning crew come in afterwards on a Sunday afternoon before kids came in. It was just a mess. So we had nowhere to go. So we were one of the last churches to even offer in-person gatherings, because we just had no space. When I think back through that time, we started creating online content. Kids' content was unreal. They did a thing called Foundation Kids on the Go, where Robin went around to people's houses and had kids teach her things, and there was a theme in it. We brought in people to read stories online during story time. We brought in PE teachers to do games at home that parents could do with their kids. We did pre-K alphabet lessons for people who had pre-Kers at home all of a sudden. Our student ministry did vlogs. Adam got buried alive one time. He also tried to jump over a river that did not go well. You should go watch that one. It's very comical. Adam did an entire online summer conference. It was unbelievable. There was even this moment where we had to do Easter online, and we were just trying to think, how do you invite someone to online Easter? And at the time, there was a toilet paper shortage, and so we came up with this little graphic here to take to your neighbors. And so people went to their neighbor's house with a thing of toilet paper and this attached to it. and they invited them to Easter. You know what I'm saying? I don't know. We're trying, okay? We're trying. I didn't say everything we do was great. I'm just saying, but we did it. We did it. Y'all don't remember the toilet paper shortage? That was a gift. It was a gift. Freaking gold. I remember we had just made a hire in October, and so we had just brought Brooke Buchanan on staff. And hey, there we go. We just brought Brooke Buchanan on staff in October, and we get to March, and everything shuts down, and all of a sudden we're not taking up offering anymore. And all of our staff, when they first come on staff, raise their salaries. And so that's a pretty extended period of time. But still, it's the reality of we were supposed to be growing with a trajectory to be able to accommodate that staff. And immediately there was this heaviness of like, hold on, God. For sure, I thought you and I were on the same page about adding a staff member. And you saw this coming. Like, I believe that you were already there in front of us. And so you saw this coming. Why didn't you tell me? Right? Because for sure, you and I, we had lots of talks about this adding a staff thing for months. He and I prayed about it. And not just me, there's a whole crew of people that were a part of the process of this. And so we had pulled the trigger, and it's like, so now I've got this extra weight of this additional staff member, which we haven't grown into because she's this whole thing, and now there's no offering. Like, this is absolutely the worst situation I could be in terms of just being a leader. Like, what in the world happened? Obviously, that was my first response. I remember Brooke asking me, she was like, hey, obviously things are going to get tight around here. And I realized I was the last one hired. So, there's no pressure, And we had that conversation. And I told her, I was like, I still feel like this is what God wants. Everything will be fine, right? It'll be fine. What I didn't know is just how much we would need someone like Brooke when there's a lack of connection. And her gift set and the things that we did, she created this call list where anyone we had a number for, we broke into teams and people just called everyone once a week. And eventually people got annoyed with it. They're like, why does the church keep calling me and asking what and that's it. Like, we didn't know what else to do. We just didn't know. Create online content and call people, right? And she led that team. And then she put together these magnets, and her team went house to house delivering balloons and magnets, just reminding people there's a lot of things in our world that have been canceled, but church is not canceled. Jesus isn't canceled. Connection isn't canceled. It turns out in 2020, even though we didn't meet 80% of the Sundays in 2020, giving actually went up 4% in 2020. COVID's online-only season was definitely full of catalytic moments that created Jesus-led movement. And today we have an ice cream flavor to savor those moments. Online Oreo. It's about 11:45 on March 25th, 2021, and I got a text message that said, hey, one of our family's houses were destroyed by a tornado. And so immediately the tornado had passed, and so I left our house and I got my truck and I started making my way towards their house. They lived right in front of the high school, right on LaGrange Street. And so I came up the back roads and some of those were closed. And so thankfully my truck was able to go into the little ditch around it and make it way up there and through it felt like a little obstacle course. And I got as far as I could up Armory. And then I parked my truck and I walked the rest of the way. And sure enough, I got there and the power poles were over. And so I made my way under the power poles, and the couple was standing there in the front yard just kind of staring at things. And it was raining. And so we talked and we prayed, and there's nothing really to say. Like, their house is just gone, just destroyed. And they're just kind of standing there just thinking. Their neighbor was sitting out on his porch next to them, and he was an older gentleman, and so I saw him, and so once they were fine, I was like, hey, I'm going to go talk to your neighbor. And so I went over and talked to his neighbor, and he was just sitting there in the rain, and so I sat down with him, and I was like, hey, are you okay? Like, I mean, what are you thinking? Like, obviously things aren't okay. I don't know what to say, and he was like, I'm alive, we're alive, and his wife was just 15 feet back, kind of looking through the house, and his house was gone except for one little corner. Like, the whole thing was just gone. There's nothing there but the floor he was standing on. And I was like, how did you survive this? And he turned around and he looked at that one corner and he said, we stood right there. And I was like, well, good corner picking, because the rest of them were gone. And I was like, how? He said, well, I heard the tornado coming, and so I got my wife out of bed. She was asleep, and I looked around, and I picked a corner, and I put her in it, and I stood in front of her, and I just stood there, and the roof started shaking, and I turned around, and I watched our roof fly away, And he's just sitting there, and I was like, well, is anyone coming? He was like, the tornado took my phone. And I was like, well, you want to use my phone? He was like, I don't know anyone's number. I just push a button, I was like, so no one even knows? He was like, my kids have no idea, I mean, maybe they watch the news. He's like, I don't know, The next morning, we didn't know what to do, so we just went back to the same place. We took our ice cream truck and trying to figure out, like, I've never even seen the destruction on LaGrange. I've never, with my eyes, seen it on TV. I've never walked through it. It was just another world. And so we're just like, well, We give people ice cream. We know how to do that, and let's start there. Let's do what we know how to do, and let's just start there, and then we'll move on. And so we went down there just to discover, And so the Mad Mexican, their power was out, and they were going to lose it. So they just said, hey, we're going to take every piece of food we have in the kitchen. We're going to put it on the truck, and we'll cook food until it runs out, and we'll just give it away to anybody who needs food or workers or whatever it is. And so the two of our food trucks just sat there in front of Newnan High School and just emptied, And while I was standing there, Chase Puckett, the principal at Newnan, came over and said, hey, we've got community partners that are already full because of what they normally do, but we need extra space to store goods that are going to come in for these things. Do you have any ideas? Do y'all have any space? Is your office big enough? And I was like, our office is tiny. It's like 1,500 square foot one side, 1,500 the other side. And I mean, even if we emptied it all out, that's not enough to do what you're asking to do. And he's like, well, just put the word out. He's like, you got a lot of people. Just maybe put a text message or a Facebook thing out, and we got to have a place. And so I was like, okay. And so I was just thinking, I was like, you know what? Let me call the people who own this building that you're sitting in. And let me call the owners and just see if maybe it was empty. Wells Fargo had gone out of business. And we were talking about purchasing this building, but we had gotten to a place where it wasn't going to be doable financially for us. They just wouldn't come off the price enough for us to be able to get it. And so we had given up on that. Just a few days prior, I had the conversation with the owners. And so I called them back, and they answered. And I was like, hey, I'm not calling back to change our offer. We're still at the same place. That's not actually what I'm calling about at all. I don't know if you've seen the news, but there's a tornado that hit, and it pretty much just like bounced over your building. It came all the way up, and then it bounced over, and then it hit the neighborhood behind it. But your building's right in the center of it, and I would love if you would let me borrow it for 10 days to open it up to receive goods and then to distribute goods. And he was like, what? And I was like, yeah. He said, is there any damage to the building? I was like, no, that building will be standing for 6 centuries. It's just concrete. There's no damage. There's nothing. And he was like, yeah, I guess, yeah. And he turned on the TV. As I'm on the phone with him, he was like, you're on CNN. And I was like, I am? He was like, well, no, you're not, but your city is. And I was like, where's the cameras, And he's like, yeah. And so the next day, we opened what we started to refer to as Base Camp. And yeah, that's good. Yeah, you can clap. We ended up running 10,718 hot meals out of Base Camp over the next 10 days. Brought in and distributed 238,000 household goods, and ended up cleaning about 50 homes worth of debris in 10 days. The ridiculous thing about the tornado, as heartbreaking and heart-wrenching as it was and still is, it unleashed an enormous amount of volunteerism and care in our community. And when I think about the tornado, I think about the 700 volunteers that walked through doors that used to be where this is walled up and walked into this space and put all kinds of supplies where you are sitting. We have a video that might bring you a few reminders.
You are not hidden. There's never been a moment you were forgotten. You are not hopeless. Though you have been broken, your innocence stolen, I hear you whisper underneath your breath. I hear your SOS, your SOS. And I will send out an army to find you in the middle of the darkest night. It's true, I will rescue you. There is no distance that cannot be covered over and over. You're not defenseless. I'll be your shelter and I'll be your armor. I hear you whisper underneath your breath.
hold breath. I hear you whisper you have nothing left. I will send out an army to find you in the middle of the darkest night. It's true, I will rescue you. I will never stop marching to reach you in the middle of the hardest fight. It's true, I will rescue you. Oh, I will rescue you.
The tornado was certainly a catalytic moment that created a Jesus-led movement. And it's not lost on me that this weekend that we gather here is a weekend that our sister church that we helped launch back in 2019 is going through the very same thing that we went through 2 years ago. In fact, City Church that we helped launch in 2019 is not gathering in person today because their future facility is also the receiving center and sending center for all household goods in Spalding County. And so they are there, and their entire church is not doing church today like you would normally do church, but they're running the center, and they're parking people, and they're gathering things, and they're distributing things, and they are getting after it. You know, it's moments like today where it's difficult as you watch them in action and you watch the results of what they're doing, and your heart just feels connected to it because of what we've experienced over the last 24 months or so. And so we want to make sure that we are doing our part as well. We've published on social media opportunities if you would like to get involved and volunteer or make donations in their direction. We've put that on our social media. But in addition to that, 100% of today's offering is going to go towards tornado relief in Griffin. And we'll tally it up at the end of the day. And so we've got a bucket that'll be just outside. It's just our normal offering bucket. Whatever you put in there today, 100%. Nothing is coming to us. It'll come to us, and then we're going to send it right back out to them this week to figure out and make sure that we're helping with their relief effort as well. And so that is part of who we are, and we want a part of who we want to continue to be. If you want more than just that, when you look on the app, it's just going to say Foundation General. There won't be a tornado relief fund. You put it in the same place, and we've just got it marked out from 12:01 this morning to 11:59 p.m. this evening. Whatever you do, even if it's not here, if you do it later on the app, whatever happens today, 100% is going to go that way. And so for sure, that's who we want to be. We started talking today about us being open-handed with what we have and just making sure that we're following the call of God. That's a part of it. When I think about the tornado, certainly the tornado rings in my head, but honestly, it's the 700 volunteers that ring true, and so we've named that ice cream flavor after them, 700 Snickerdoodle. Last one, I know I'm out of time, but so I'm gonna hurry. The last one is our fifth catalytic movement or moment that created a Jesus-led movement is where you're sitting. It's Base Camp. This was never supposed to be ours. We thought it was supposed to be, but honestly, and I don't have enough time to tell you now what I was going to tell you, but the amount of things that happened to make this not happen is just unbelievable. Even down to we had given up on it just a few days before the tornado hit. It was because of the work that happened here in the building that caused them to say, hey, you know what? We will come down to a number that fits within what you can do financially. If it wasn't for that, it would have never happened. If it wasn't for COVID, this building would have never been empty. Wells Fargo would still be here. Wells Fargo is known for historic long leases in historic city centers all over the country. This is one of those. If it wasn't for that rock and a hard place COVID moment, this never is available. If it wasn't for the tornado and the results of 700 volunteers, nobody decides to come off of profit so that someone else might have a home and a place to live in or a place to call home. It's those kind of moments that when we look back on it, it's like, man, that was such a difficult season. but what God brings from it continues to be just unbelievable. Base Camp for sure is a catalytic moment that created a Jesus-led movement. This is my favorite flavor, by the way. It's going to be the one all the way on the end, and it is named Base Camp Blueberry Cheesecake. Every single one of these are in line out there, and we want to make sure that you get into it. Last little thing I'm going to bring to your attention, all of these 5 moments that we talked about, all these 5 things actually started with a really big gut check before they all happened. It was 2017. It was March of 2017, and I had to go to a conference. It was required by Stadia to go to a conference about church planting and just sit around and hang out and ask questions. And so I went to this one, and there was this guy who was speaking. His name was Jason. He was from Michigan, and he was a church planter there, and he was talking about community engagement. And one of the stories he shared was how he had his church had given shoes to an elementary school that had a pretty large need. And I was like, hey, that's one of the things that we want to do at Ruth Hill. I need to talk to this guy when he's done. And so I remember waiting around and just waiting and waiting and waiting. And the crowd cleared out, and all the people that wanted to talk to me cleared out. And so I just kind of hung back just like the creeper in the back. Like, and then I walked up to him, and I was like, hey, I know you said you were done. I got to talk to you about these shoes. Okay, and I'm not from here. I'm not from Michigan. So I just need to talk to you about these shoes. So I want to do these shoes for this school. It's called Ruth Hill. It's the same thing. I've talked to some faculty. There's a huge need there for shoes. And so we want to do the same thing. It's just, God has put us together, right? So tell me how you did it. Logistically, how did it work? How did you get sizes off of kids? What did they allow you to do, right? How did you get it? Did you get a wholesale? Did you just walk into like Foot Locker and say, hey, give me all these? Like, how did that work, right? And he's like, well, how many kids are? So I started telling him, it's about 400 kids, right? Like, all right, so we started talking logistics, and he answered all my questions, and I was like, oh, this is so good. Look what God has done. He's put us together, right? This is so good. This is why I'm here, you know? He's like, you know what? He hooked me up with the guy who did the wholesaling for him, a representative with Adidas. And I was like, it didn't get any better than this. He's like, any other questions? I was like, no, that's it. He's like, cool, I got a question for you. And I was like, okay, well, I'm good at answering questions, you know? I don't think you know anything that I've done or anything like that to ask me a question, but here we go. You know, so I'm thinking, like, what question could he ask me? And so I told him in the conversation that we were going to be doing this, like the very first thing. Like once we launch, the very first thing we're going to do is the shoe project. We're going to launch and we're going to hit it right out the gate. We're going to hit the ground running with the shoe project. And so he said, hey, why are you waiting until after you launch to do the shoe project? And I was like, oh, I mean, just money. You know, it's about I did the math, and I was like, about $17,000. So just money, you know, just makes sense. You know, financial responsibility, that kind of thing. He's like, yeah. He's like, all right, well, for sure, if you don't have $17,000 now to do it, you won't have it after you launch. Well, no, sure I will. Sure I will. Because see, the thing is, I don't know if you know this or not, that people come and they give offering, right? And that's how churches get money. I don't know if you know this or not, church planter, but that's how it happens. And so right now, there's nobody to come and give offering. That's why I don't have $17,000. But when they do come, and then I'll tell them, and then they'll put the money in the bucket, right? I didn't explain that to him. That was very smart. That was a very smart aleck. There we go. Very smart aleck. But I just said, well, I mean, because we'll have people and they'll give offering and we'll have money. He said, no, if you don't have $17,000 now, you're not going to have it after your launch. I was like, again, okay. He's like, I'm serious. Yeah, you'll have people and you'll have more offering for sure. But you won't have 17 grand to go spend on shoes. I'm like, well, why not? He said, because there'll be something else more important. Just like there is now, there's something else more important. And I was like, well, I mean, like we got to like get an office. He's like, right, something else more important. I was like, well, that is important. He's like, oh yeah, it's more important, yeah. He said, I'm not disagreeing with you. I'm just stating the facts. I was like, so you're saying, he's like, you know what I'm saying. And so I had to think, okay, well, what kind of church will we be? So I told him, I said, well, we're going to do it this fall before we launch. And he looked at me in the eyes and he said, good choice. And that was the end of the conversation. And every single time we have a really big financial decision to make, I think through what's most important. What's most important? Because if we always find ourselves, which is the way finance works, we always find ourselves between a rock and a hard place. But as followers of Jesus, isn't that just where we want to be? Next to the rock? When the rock is Jesus? And if we decide we're always just going to do whatever you call us to do. If you call us to be crazy generous, even when it doesn't make sense, if you called us to it, then you're on the hook for the don't make sense part. We're on the hook for the obedience. There's another catalytic moment that created Jesus-led movements. Rock and hard place. There's this moment in the book of Psalms where God is speaking, and he says this to his people. He says, if my people would only listen to me, if Israel would only follow my ways, how quickly I would subdue their enemies and turn my hand against their foes. Those who hate the Lord would cringe before him, and their punishment would last forever. And here it is, ready? But you would be fed with the finest of wheat. With honey from the rock, I would satisfy you. But you would be fed with the finest of wheat. With honey from the rock, I would satisfy you. Now, when we read that, it's like, hold on, God, I don't know if you're aware or not, but honey doesn't come from rocks. You see what happens, there's these bees, and they get this high, and they create this honeycomb. That's where honey comes from, God. Maybe from way up where you're at, it looks like a rock, but when you get close, it's not a rock. It's soft. You know what I'm saying? It's not that. But God is saying, hey, if my people will simply do what I ask, I'll put you in a rock and a hard place, which is exactly where you need to be. Because the truth is, that is where your nourishment will come from. Because I'm the rock, and you know what you get from the rock? Honey. Honey. So he says, anytime you find yourself in a rock and a hard place, lean into the rock. The hard place is it's not going to go anywhere. But lean into the rock, because that's where the honey comes from. He says, in this trial, in the season of trials and difficulty, in the midst of chaos and destruction, in the midst of you can't go here, or you can't afford this, or there's no chance this is going to happen, or shut it all down, or whatever the circumstances are, as long as it's a rock and a hard place, lean into the rock, because honey comes from the rock. What we have experienced over the last 5 years, honey from a rock. So many good things from so many impossible situations. You see, we have tasted and seen that the Lord is good. Blessed is the one who takes refuge in him. We take refuge in the rock. We are nourished by the rock. The rock is our foundation. And if this remains true, we will continue to be part of catalytic moments that create Jesus-led movements. Happy 5th birthday, Foundation.